I was really interested, when we talked, we had coffee about you doing manufacturers engage with us. The focus was on innovation. And, I'm still really, really interested how that topic has really maybe changed. What does the innovation conversation look like today? And where it's probably moving very, very quickly because it has to in a lot of different aspects, but also, what's the future planning, now look like, and what's the perspective around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I remember, my own set of webcasts and different Zoom calls about innovation and what other companies are doing. And so, what's interesting, I think, is that if you thought, innovation was going to happen over a 5-year period, evolving, all of these sorts of things, what we're actually seeing now is like in certain places, like innovation on steroids, where, people in certain areas, people are seeing the desire and need to innovate accelerate so much more quickly in so many ways in so many different places. And, I'll give you a couple of examples of things that, we've been thinking about, talking to other people about. So, obviously this virtual workforce is the new norm. It is going to be the new norm. And I'm sure you've heard this from other people, but I think many companies are not going to go back to the way, things were. And I know that may make you a little bit despondent, Luke, being in commercial real estate, but, I think people are going to definitely need to adapt to that new norm in terms of, just what we've all learned at this point in time is that having been at home now for over a month and a half, transitioning our workforce to work from home in less than a week, productivity levels are up, people's engagement is up, people are feeling like they can do the things that they need to do while being able to support their family. Our businesses has not slipped a beat. And so when I look at all of those aspects of things, and especially in digital, really digitally oriented businesses, people are going to really ask themselves the question, okay, well, why would I want to go back to having people in the office and having long commutes to work and things of that nature? Places like New Jersey and California where people are like, hey, I'll give everybody, a high-speed Wi-Fi connection or a high-speed bandwidth at home, and they can be more productive, and I get a couple of extra hours of them out at work, and they're happier. And maybe I get everybody together on a quarterly basis at a team level, in a location to kind of meet and collaborate and socialize. But for the most part, I don't need to maintain the level of real estate because people are productive from home. So the innovation really comes in with, what we're doing right now. How do you support large group type virtual experiences, virtual whiteboarding, maintaining the traffic flow between folks on calls, all of those sorts of things, right? And so number one, I think you're going to see tremendous innovation over the next 12 to 18 months in the virtual work from home space. The other thing you're going to see just put on steroids here is tons of money going into autonomy and drones and things of that nature. I think you're already seeing some people test drones with CVS, for example, around medical deliveries. There's no reason that drones will not become more prevalent going forward. And so whether that's grocery delivery, whether that's delivery of medical supplies, whether that's in firefighting type exercises, whether that's in any of those sorts of conditions, you're going to see companies double down on drone research. A perfect example is that, like, I get shipments now where it's already pre-packed in like ice and it's like been shipped from somewhere over a 3-day period. So for even things like eggs and things of that nature, I mean, you could see a situation where somebody packs it into a cold box, you get delivered, you pick it up, pull it out, you press a button, the drone goes back to, where it was originally, no human contact. Same thing with like driving and things of that nature. I can only see that accelerating because, you've seen, just some sanitary related issues with Lyft drivers, Uber drivers, whether, they've been with so many different people. If you don't have a human driver in the car, you don't have, any of the sterilization issues. You could sort of have a drone in there after somebody drives, completely sterilize the vehicle using sort of some sort of an autonomous method. So, so the whole the whole autonomous space is going to be one that accelerates. The third thing is just, you're already seeing it in terms of what's gone on with potential therapeutics for COVID treatments, but artificial intelligence, big data, if you didn't think that it was already important, which I think everybody did, it's even more important, because I think at the end of the day, what just in terms of gleaning new insights, supporting your clients remotely, all of those things, digitization of paper-based content, all of that kind of stuff like goes on steroids right now, because nobody ever wants to be caught behind the 8 ball with this thing again. And so like the whole notion of digitization, dataization, all of those things, right, is going to be just accelerated exponentially. So I think, you're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation where there are new capabilities introduced in all of those areas. And then obviously the whole biotech space is just going to explode here over the next, few years, where, because of this, you're going to see more and more platforms for accelerated vaccine development, accelerated drug development, accelerated testing capabilities. Every historic period I've seen where something like this happens, and you saw it after 9/11 in terms of surveillance technologies, video technologies, all of those sorts of things, a major event like this accelerates innovation in certain areas that were deeply affected or could have benefited from additional innovation in those areas. So, think about the whole remote ability theme and the whole efficiency theme, and that's where you're going to see it on steroids, because frankly, people are going to find it challenging people are going to ask the question, is the juice worth the squeeze in terms of putting people back into physical location, socially distancing them, all of those sorts of things? Because like, okay, like what, I ask people, why do we go to the office? So we can be in a meeting room together, we can collaborate. Well, we all have to wear masks while we're collaborating, or we can only have 3 people in the meeting room because we got to sit 6 feet apart. Well, why won't we just do it like we were doing it here? We're probably having a better collaboration than we would in a meeting room. And so I think those are the kinds of questions that companies are going to ask themselves. And then, over some period of time, those behaviors just become more permanent. I think people are also going to need to really rethink like conferences, how do those work, all those sorts of things. And so, so I think those are the areas you're going to see innovation. I would say crisis is the mother of all invention, and you're certainly going to see it now over the next 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's so much innovation out of necessity right now, what do you think's the biggest? What kind of companies do you think are at the biggest risk right now, for all of the reasons that you just mentioned? I mean, you yourself is in an industry that is becoming, much more highly automated, much easier to do without having to go to a bank or, consult with a, financial advisor. And your industry is growing quite a bit. But what do you think is really at risk right now for making major change, regardless of whether they can innovate themselves out of it or not?
I mean, I personally think group travel, group transportation is in big trouble. You know, these were businesses that never had big profitable margins to begin with, and I think, you know, now if you think about it, people are even more sensitive to being in those kinds of large group settings, traveling. You know, I know we as a family are talking about how do we return to travel, and you know, my wife is pretty much adamant. You know, well, I'll just drive my son anywhere for his tennis tournaments. You know, as long as it's in my car and I don't have to interact with anybody else. I'll drive him to Florida. I'll drive him to Alabama. I'll drive him to California. You know, and so, you know, when you begin to have more and more people, you know, think in terms of, you know, controlling what they can control, certainly anything that involves public transportation is in dire straits to some degree. And so, so I think that's going to be one that's going to, you know, I think they're going to have to think through what does, you know, transportation of the future look like? You know, does this lead to, is this what leads to more affordable, private, smaller jets, you know, or, you know, like, you know, we've talked about flying cars in the past, you know, is this what propels those kinds of things to occur, right? Because I think people are going to want a faster method of transportation. I just think that, you know, until we have a vaccine, you know, where people feel more safe going back onto airplanes, is the group travel industry going to be able to support that? Cruises had a bad rap for illness even before this, and you know, now it's like I don't think anyone feels compelled to go on to cruises. So I mean, I think that's going to be one area, and then you're looking at all the dovetail effects of that. Restauranting. I mean, I think I read a good article in the Wall Street Journal this weekend about a guy who's completely rethinking how to do restauranting now going forward in the future, right? Good telltale signs is they've opened up restaurants in the state of Georgia, right? But, you know, most of the restaurants are still completely vacant because I think people, you know, have gotten ingrained into this, you know, this culture where, you know, I think, you know, I have this memory. I mean, I would love to go back to a restaurant sometime, but I'm okay having dinner at home, ordering in, you know, putting a bottle of wine on the table, just kind of enjoying that family time. So I think rethinking the food and dining industry is going to be something that is going to be a big change as we go forward through this period. I think a lot of people are going to be very hesitant to return to dining establishments or bars, you know, here in the near future. So I think those are going to be some that are going to be challenging. And then, you know, obviously the secondary effects of that, you know, retail is another one. I think what you're going to see is, I just started trying out Stitch Fix, which is an interesting model for retail. I think you're going to see a lot more traditional retailers move to that model. I think you're going to see a conglomeration of brands. So you saw J. Crew file for bankruptcy over the weekend. I think, you know, L Brands is obviously filing for bankruptcy, you know, out of this whole issue that they're in. And then I don't see a situation where, I mean, Macy's and other brands had trouble attracting traffic as is. You know, I think if mall traffic declines, then I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of retailers that file for bankruptcy but reemerge potentially as a online pure play where they basically will pick up a bunch of these brands, assemble them into sort of an online collection, and do their businesses completely online, like a Stitch Fix, you know, which is basically mail order. So there's going to be, I think, a whole impact around physical retail. So transportation and logistics is going to benefit a lot from that, just in terms of the FedExes, the UPSs, of the world, that I think people are, there isn't a day now that I don't get at least 3 boxes. And I already did a lot of online shopping, but, if you look at the most recent numbers from Amazon, you're going to see an acceleration of those kinds of models, I think, in retail. And so I think that you've seen who the winners are, and I think some of who the spoilers are. We have some branches in our business, but we're really going to be running some experiments to see who actually shows up to those branches for what purpose. And so I think that'll also emerge in a fundamental rethinking of how people interact in the future.
I'm going to flip to Steve and Stacy and see if they have any questions, because I'll keep going and going and going.
I have a question, and it's been something that's been on my mind. I've been, for the most part, nearly a lifelong resident of Macomb County, and we've got a very established manufacturing base. But we saw something like this happen, and it's causing massive disruption in employment and supply chain flows. Honestly, the autos are in a weird space as well. They're in this kind of perpetual state of impending radical change to what they make. If Macomb County were going to hedge its bet and manufacture something else, what do you think we should manufacture?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what we've demonstrated. So number one, I think that there's got to be really an emphasis around a return to American manufacturing. And so I think, number one, what I would like to see, what I hope we will see, is for people to take a step back, our lawmakers to take a step back and say, hey, at the end of the day, we need to put more emphasis around our domestic supply chain. We have a ton of resources. And I'm a global-minded individual, but quite frankly, I think that we have a great country with a lot of talent, and leaders of the past, especially in the 1990s, made a lot of mistakes in terms of looking at cost as an optimist, labor cost as an optimist for and for driving corporate profits. And I think at this point, what people need to do is take a step back and say, thoughtfully, what are the things that we should be building here so that we're getting high quality products in highly efficient and automated assembly lines. One of my favorite books, by the way, is My Work, My Life by Henry Ford. It's his autobiography that he wrote in the early 1900s, where he talks about how he designed the entire Ford Motor Company, manufacturing processes and fair labor and all of these sorts of things. And he looked at manufacturing as like an ongoing set of efficiencies where we would continue to improve upon how a factory operates. He would tinker with new things. He would experiment with new things. And I think that's what we need to do, in manufacturing in Michigan. And I think if you look at different kinds of medical devices, if you look at different kinds of even electronics that people use for new home devices, more, electric vehicles, which are undoubtedly going to continue to be on the rise here over the next 5 years in different parts around that supply chain. All of the drones that are going to need to be built for transportation and logistics. Those are all, I think, right into the sweet spot of people who have been in the automotive industry going forward. So I think you got to look at those as being potential options to invest in. I don't think it would take a tremendous amount of reskilling of labor in this day and age to be able to operate control systems that are on different kinds of products. We certainly saw GM adapt very quickly to making ventilators. And so I think that these auto companies are going to need to think about really how they redefine themselves, going forward beyond just auto companies. Maybe it's more transportation companies, logistic companies. What else are they going to manufacture? But I typically tell people in my business to look at adjacencies, like what are things that are one step removed from what they're doing, right? So like, Honda has always been famous for like being a motor company, not an auto company. So, I think those are the kinds of things that I would invest in if I was, in Macomb County. My brother-in-law just bought an electric lawnmower, for the first time, which he loves. Battery capacity, that's going to be huge going forward. There's just going to be, I think, all kinds of telecommunications devices that are needed for high-speed networks. Those are all the things that I would say are probably great opportunities, for folks in Macomb to invest in. And it's also going to be, I think, it's going to require a little bit of a reflection period based upon Michigan, and for Michigan manufacturing, in terms of the unions and things like that. I mean, I know the unions have typically hung their hat on the automotive industry, and maybe haven't been open to some of the policies that other types of manufacturing has brought. I believe very strongly in a fair wage, healthcare benefits, all those different things. I think everybody's going to have to come together and rethink how these partnerships are formed in order to be able to sort of usher in a new era and dawn for manufacturing in this country.
To shift gears from kind of manufacturing, the chamber represents small mom and pop businesses, those that rely on foot traffic, people walking in, people sitting down and having dinner. What are some suggestions that you can give these small businesses to be innovative and to evolve to whatever, our new normal, our new reality looks like, in order for them to remain in business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of the challenge, Stacy, is that a lot of those businesses haven't invested in basic digital capabilities like websites, email marketing, text messaging to their customers, customer loyalty programs, all of those sorts of things, right? And they need to, I think, learn some basic tech around how to be better sort of guerrilla marketers, and also how to rethink their business models and things like that. Understanding the data of what people have ordered in the past, maybe promotions, things of that nature, right? And then recognizing that this is probably going to be a period of time where people are going to be less willing to come into restaurants, thinking about, okay, how can I, whether it's through delivery or, whether it's through, different types of partnerships, create a experience for customers who are most likely going to stay home, right? And want to only do things from home to continue to be able to sell their products and services on a remote basis, right? So I think there's some really interesting things that people could think about. Like, for example, I'll give you a great example. Like, so, and I'm sure many men and women have had to deal with this right now: haircuts and hair coloring, right? So, and so right now, like, my wife typically goes in to get her hair colored, once a month. I typically get my hair cut once a month, and so do my boys. None of us can do that right now, and so. What about through Zoom, having local hair salons kind of send people a kit to color their own hair, style their own hair, cut their own hair with videos that they can watch on how to do it for some like basic charge, right? I'd probably pay for that, in terms of, or somebody coming up with like an easy kit of how you can get, a basic haircut, right? So I mean, we experimented with my son last night, and there's mixed results. But I think you gotta, like, if you're a small business, you gotta be on the offensive, you know, here, and you gotta think through, like, okay, like, this just happened. What is this? How are all the ways that this is going to impact, and how do I pivot my business so that my customers are still there, right? They just don't want to, like, you know, they're not going to come to me, so I got to go to them. So how do I go to them, right? If you're in like local retail and you're in like clothing and things like that, well, how do you sort of spin up advertising? How do you do more word of mouth? You know, how do you, you know, potentially, if you can get a couple of people into your store, do some like modeling of products and use Instagram and things like that to, you know, market it. Can you socialize that with like local high schools or students, you know, who might be able to share it with their friends? Can you incentivize them? So I think you got to like really rethink the whole notion of network, guerrilla, word of mouth kind of marketing. Really rethink, how do you go to your customers versus waiting for your customers to come to you? That's what I see as the biggest gap right now in terms of small businesses. And I think it's a competency gap to some degree too, you know, it's that they just haven't had to do that and adapt in that way. And so they don't know what those resources are. So as a chamber of commerce, I think you guys would be in a great position to play a role in terms of how do you rethink your business to survive in a more, in a model where your customers are going to stay remote from you.
I like it. Because we have to rethink, right? The chamber has to rethink how we've done things. We've done, you know, events. We do big events. We do networking events. We do breakfast and you know, so we've had to rethink how we function, and then how to provide a service that is still valuable to our membership. You know, we're all kind of evolving in all of this too.
Yeah, I mean, I had an awesome event last week and I thought this was really, really innovative. So one of my technology partners, I mean, we usually do like, in technology, like I'll go to a conference, there'll be like dinners at a conference, and, you know, or I'll go, somebody will organize like a group dinner. So somebody did I'm going to bring a virtual wine tasting to you, right? So they sent me a care package with 2 glasses, 3 half bottles of wine. It was from 5 to 6:30. There was going to be a speaker, some group activities. And so we did it from 5 to 6:30, and it was a great way. We had like, I don't know, half a dozen technology leaders from other different companies. We talked about some different things. It was just in a Zoom format like this. But like, I thought that was really cool. And that's the only person that's like done that, right? So, and usually I'll go to like some of these venture capitals will like pitch companies to me and things of that nature, and they'll do it over like wine and a dinner. Like, well, why not, you know, set up with a local restaurant and, you know, a local establishment where I can pick up a meal, it gets delivered to me at home, I get on my Zoom call, you know, everybody shares what they're eating, you go, you know, entrepreneur can do a pitch from their house, you know, you can ask questions via Zoom. I mean, nobody's done that yet, you know, and for me at least. And, but there's lots of things that you can do that are just as fun, you know, and, I think people just have to be creative in terms of how they do these kind of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Those are the kinds of things I think that will keep, you know, Main Street alive as well, right? All of those different restaurateurs and retailers that are supporting those kinds of things, that part of that promotion process that you talked about.
Yeah, you know, ice cream is another one. Like, I know people love to have ice cream, but like, you know, if they invested in some, you know, cooler delivery systems, you know, my wife is always like trying to figure out like, okay, when can we get some ice cream? But I haven't heard anybody proactively sort of say, hey, you know, they all have just chosen to shut down, you know, but maybe they can do it from like a remote warehouse, or maybe they can do it from somebody's house, you know. It's just, I think you just got to learn how to be scrappy and new in different ways, you know.
My favorite ice cream place has done DoorDash. So they have figured out a way to have ice cream delivered.
Yep. So I think that's awesome. That's exactly the way to do it, right?
They've been around since 1942. So to watch something that's been around for that long evolve into something like this, I think is awesome.
Right. Or can, like, you know, Dairy Queen start sending giving everybody a rent a soft serve machine, right? And you get a soft serve machine at home, and they send you the things to mix, and you create your own soft.
Dear.
That's dangerous.
And then we keep empowering every weight loss organization known to man too at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you recreate your supply chain of services. You know, people can do these online fitness classes, and, you know, then they need to buy weights in order to do that, you know, or different kinds of like exercise equipment. And then you have like sneaker stores that can deliver to your house. I mean, you're basically like re-enabling your entire value chain of products and services by like rethinking one part of that equation. Like right now, I think a lot of the distress is due to the fact that if one part of the equation is broken, it breaks all the other parts of the equation. And, I think what we have to do is figure out where the equation is broken right now and figure out new ways to re-enable that. That's going to be challenging. You know, that's going to be the interesting things. You know, movie theaters, I've heard some people are bringing back drive-thrus this summer because, they know that people will come to see the movies in a car.
I did see that too. Perfect time to reignite the drive-in theater. And the ice cream man.
Right.
We need an autonomous ice cream truck.
That, I think, is something that is definitely going to be on the forefront of innovation as we go forward.
Isn't it funny how you're seeing all these older technologies? Like I saw a Schwann's truck in my neighborhood, you know, dropping off milk and whatever the case is. I hadn't seen a Schwann's truck since the 70s.
We get deliveries from Calder Dairy every Tuesday, so we've always used a remote delivery of milk and butter and things like that. So, I mean, a delivery service. So we're pretty used to that. We love that service.
Well, great. Any closing thoughts, Vijay, comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that the only other closing thought and comment I would say is that I think it's incredibly important for every company to be spending time rethinking the implications of like what's going to happen and like adapting rapidly. Like I do think that there's going to be a thriving American economy for, centuries to come. I just think it's going to be different than the one that existed in January and February of this year. And so I think it's really, really important for people to rethink the implications of all those things, right? What's funny is like I was at the automakers for forever, right? I was at Ford for 12 years, and there's so much resistance around like online vehicle ordering and delivery and all of those things. And now, I don't know that automakers can really survive without online delivery, right? And so, does it create a situation now where, pricing has to be more transparent? People basically place their order online. The dealer, drives it to your house. They, leave the car in the driveway. All those kinds of things, right? So, you wonder how does that work, right? I mean, I ordered a Peloton and during this period, and they drove it to my house. They assembled it in the truck, and they left it outside my front door. And I just had to bring it in, plug it in, do a few things, and it was ready to go, right? So I think those are the kinds of things where, I think the auto industry needs to like think about how things change. So I think that's the most important thing I would get away, is that every company should be thinking about how do they adapt, how do they make money, what are the new sources of revenue they bring in. I do think you're going to find companies during this period, and I used this term with somebody on Saturday when I was talking to them. It's like, is a digital judo move, which is there are the ones that can stay ahead of this curve and kind of come up with new ways of doing business are gonna have a digital judo move. And so they're gonna come out of this period where they thought through how they need to change and how they need to adapt, and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna be competitively advantaged because they're prepared for a much more flexible business model. And so that's what I would say is people really need to think through is like, how do I adapt, you know, during these times to become more digital and be where my customers are at, you know? So that's going to be, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. Be really interesting. I like your comments on the autos delivering vehicles. I did also get a Peloton a couple weeks ago. I got it for my wife's birthday, but
I hope
yeah,
it was for her, right, Luke?
it was for her. But I've used it equally, and I actually have taken some of her time away, and she gets very upset about that. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to the auto industry, which everybody is so used to, it's, you know, transparency, it's cost, it's, you know, it's what do you call it? I'm drawing a blank on the word for it. But the opportunity to increase awareness in brand and loyalty is what I was thinking. Like, how does that happen? And you do have like a layer of dealerships that are in between the consumer and the product. And, you know, does eliminating that layer of dealership reduce the cost of the vehicle? Or does the dealership also have to evolve as to more of a, you know, virtual showroom without all of the sales staff necessarily? It's actually more of a warehouse hub than anything else. So, but as we know, I mean, the auto industry is very, very slow to evolve, unfortunately.
I would think you're going to see that.
It's gonna happen, right? I think they're going to have to rethink these partnerships. I mean, there's a really interesting there's a couple of interesting companies. Vroom, which does used vehicle sales. You can do it all online. They deliver it to you. You can look at the inventory online, look at all the specs online, and then you can try it for 7 days, and they'll actually take it back if you don't like the vehicle after that point in time. So there's some really interesting models that I think, you know, are out there that automakers would be wise to take a look at and adapt.
I was gonna say it almost looks like you're gonna see this happen in more traditional retail as far as shopping malls and things like that before you would in a dealership, because there's still something there as far as service goes that you have to go back to the dealership right now.
Right.
But
you know, the thing with that is that somebody could show up at your house, pick up your vehicle, and then take it to the dealership, service it, and bring it back to your house. That might be the new model.
Right. That's a good point. Stacy,
I don't know about, you know, like grocery shopping, right? And there's so many people that have changed their patterns around grocery shopping. You know, it's like behaviorally, you know, now we just like put things onto a grocery list, and then once a week we'll go online and, you know, put our Amazon, you know, Whole Foods list together, find a delivery time slot, and it gets delivered, you know, within a couple of hours, right? I mean, there are more people that are doing that. Instacart, you know, same sort of things, right? So, I mean, I think people are sort of thinking, okay, well, you know, is that where I want to be spending my time, is going to the grocery store and, like, you know, going through aisles, whereas, you know, somebody in this new economy who understands that store's layout or that store's workers, it's gonna be really interesting, I think, to see how this all unfolds here over the next, you know, 18 months or so.
we've been doing curbside pickup at Walmart pretty regularly, but it's also taken me another hour to go through each piece that we purchased and wiping it down with a sanitizing wipe for extra precaution. So it's still a 2-hour ordeal in our house from start to finish.
I have not had luck with grocery delivery or Instacart or pickup. So I have been doing and I'm I'm a go into a store type of person. So this has been a challenge for me just overall because my habits is that I'm an equal opportunity shopper. I will shop anywhere that will take a credit card or debit card. So there are still deliveries. Amazon just let me know that there's something on my front porch.
Me too.
But this has been a challenge. The groceries have been a challenge for me because I do enjoy that trip to the grocery store. So I have been going, just less.
Yeah, and it's, I think everybody's going to adapt in their own ways, right? I mean, it's very, very interesting. It's I hate going to the grocery store. I hated it in any time, right? So, but I still went. And now I just do almost everything using Amazon Whole Foods. And I know that there's a little bit of an art to finding a delivery slot, but once I find one, it's like,
don't give it up. Yeah. And don't give it up. When one opens up, you take it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think we'll all learn a lot. And I think, giving guidance to our businesses to think about how things might be different, I think is reskilling workforce. And so I think, Sterling Heights is probably the thing you really need to think about is how do you reskill folks to learn new ways of doing business, so they can be best positioned to take on different kinds of roles as we move forward into the future.
Very
Awesome.
good.
Thank you.
I think education is a whole nother, we could spend another hour on education and the future of education. So that's, I think that's also going to be a big change in society.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, cool.
I mean, I think we have to really consider the whole notion of, college education and whether, did you really learn more by going to a college? You are more of these sort of, 2-year programs. I told somebody a couple of weeks ago, I said, other than to watch sports and, go to parties, like, what is the point of going to campus, right? And is that worth $50,000 per year?
Right.
I don't know. I consistently say that I learned more about life than in being away on a college campus than I did in what I learned in a classroom. Now,
Right.
Granted, it took me, 12 years to pay off my student loans, and so I get all of that. But it was the experiential learning that I had, I think, is invaluable.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I wouldn't give it up for anything, but I think in light of the costs nowadays and the perceived benefits, in the midst of sort of this kind of an economic, situation, I think a lot of people are really going to ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Like, just as a pure employer of like software engineers, I'd rather have somebody go to a 2-year program for software engineering and learn what I need them to learn to develop software than to go to, any college and take a bunch of humanities courses and different things, right? I don't need them to know, world religions to develop software, right? So,
I could have eliminated that physics class that I had to take. That would be, I'm in.
Exactly. So it's going to be really interesting and fascinating, I think. I think community colleges should really be thinking about how they potentially reinvent themselves to serve the needs of, more, necessary local skills that people will want to do more online, all of these sorts of things. Again, I think you're going to see a lot of partnerships with different online providers, community colleges. I think there's a lot that's going to need to happen there as well.
Well, the cool thing is we had a speaker on a couple weeks ago, Nancy Giordano, who's a futurist. Vijay, I'm not sure if you've heard of her or seen any of her.
It sounds really familiar.
She's good friends with Steve, and a lot of her focus is on the future of workforce. And the reality is when you start talking about artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality and those types of skill sets, you don't have to go to a 4-year university to learn that stuff. In fact, you probably know better than anybody else. I mean, some of the best and brightest in the business, don't even have a college degree when it comes to programming and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I totally could not agree more. But it's like Stacy says, more of the social growth. I think that is the value of being on campus.
I agree.
My whole extroverted world has been turned around over the last, 8 weeks. I'm not good at this, so I've been evolving.
I have a colleague who literally about every 6 weeks to 8 weeks takes a 1-week trip to somewhere exotic. So, whether that's like Colombia or Peru or Africa, she's married, but they don't have any children. So this is what they, sort of spend their disposable income on. And she's like, I'm just depressed because this is like defined my life, is taking these trips to these exotic places. And, now I'm just trapped in my house, right? So it's definitely very interesting to see how this all, changes. I mean, I personally miss live sports. I mean, I'm just missing it, immensely. So I've been watching The Last Dance, which, has helped me relive the era of professional basketball, the heyday of it. So that's been nice.
Me too. I've turned my son into a firm believer that MJ's the GOAT and not LeBron. So
Yes.
big impact on him.
There's no question about it if you watch The Last Dance. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anything else, guys?
This was great.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. And, Luke, if I can be of assistance to you guys in any other way, would be happy to, if you figure out that you want to do something virtual with folks from manufacturing or small businesses and we want to make it topical, I mean, I could even, potentially do some time with like rethinking your business and, different opportunities to think about. So if you think that something like that might be valuable, leveraging digital innovation, automation, I'm happy to support that in any way I can.
Okay. We might take you up on that for sure, Vijay. I appreciate the offer.
All right. Well, you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thanks, Vijay.
Thanks a bunch.
Bye-bye.